Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the May 11th edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy, and I'm happy to be here with you all today. We had a lot of questions coming from our community about Parent Plus loans, so you'll see that the content today is focused on that area. We are trying something a bit different, so bear with me for a moment while I share my screen, and I'm going to tell you a bit about office hours and then get right into the questions that came from our community. So, overall, the center was founded in 2021 with the vision to help all college and career school students in the state of Maryland achieve these six pillars of collegiate financial wellness. That's being creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. We want to help students and their families build financial life skills and empower them to thrive. If that's a mission that you feel that you would like to support, please visit us online at mccfw.org to learn more about our programs and events, such as office hours. Again, it's a free semi-monthly virtual student loan clinic that provides borrowers with a trusted venue to help them navigate student loans and prepare for financial success beyond repayment. I must give a disclaimer, though, that office hours is presented for informational purposes only and should not be construed as financial or legal advice. We do our best to give you the most reliable and timely information, but ultimately, any decisions about your student loans have to do with your student loans. It's a very personal area. Everybody's journey in repayment is different. And so you want to make sure that you're recognizing those differences, taking into account to your loan portfolio, your personal financial circumstances, goals, and preferences before you make any decisions. So the information you hear today should not be construed as personalized or financial or legal advice. So now that I've got that out of the way, let's get to the first question. That is, should I take a Parent Plus loan or a private student loan? What is the difference? So with Parent Plus loans, they are different from private loans in a few ways. The chart that you see here is focused on the characteristics of Parent Plus loans versus private loans: the lender, the borrower, the interest rates and terms, as well as access to federal benefits. So let's talk about Parent Plus loans first. I hear a lot of people who think that Parent Plus loans are private loans. That's actually not true. Parent Plus loans are issued by the federal government, not private lenders. The borrower for a Parent Plus loan is the parent only. As for the interest and terms, since the loans come from the federal government, the interest rates and the terms are the same for all borrowers. And because they're federal student loans, they do have access to some federal student loan benefits. Private loans are different because the lender is not the federal government. It's instead a bank or an alternative lender. As such, there are different standards that apply for approval. And a lot of that depends on who the borrower is. A student could take out a private loan for themselves, but because most students don't have income, might not have a lot of assets, they might be required to get a co-signer, which will be where the parent enters the picture. A parent could also take out a loan for their student, and that parent would be solely responsible for repaying that debt. As I mentioned, the application process is different because once you leave the realm of the federal government, banks and private lenders can have their own applications. They can have their own terms, such as interest rates, fees, and repayment plans. But all of that is going to depend on the lender. And as far as the interest rates and key terms are concerned, that depends on the borrower's creditworthiness. And since those loans come from a lender outside of the federal government, those loans do not have access to federal student loan benefits. So if you're thinking about this decision, whether to take out Parent Plus loans, or you know you have to borrow and you're just deciding whether to take Parent Plus loans or private loans, here are some key questions for you to consider. The first one is, do you want to be responsible for the loan? If you take out a Parent Plus loan, you are responsible for repaying that loan. If you were to co-sign a private student loan for your child, then your child would be primarily responsible. But if the child does not pay, then you would become responsible for that debt. If you took out a private student loan on your own, then you would be responsible for that debt as well. But the first question I think you should think about is, who's going to be responsible for that debt? And as a parent, are you comfortable with being responsible for that debt? The second question is, if you are going to take out the debt, whether it's a Parent Plus loan or a private student loan, Do you have capacity to repay the loan? I ask that because if you take out a loan, you're going to be responsible for repaying that loan. And if you know up front that you are not going to be able to repay that loan, then you're going to expose yourself to the consequences of potentially becoming delinquent or going into default on a student loan. That can damage your credit. It can cause lenders to not want to do business with you or to give you less um, less cost-effective lending options. You might have higher interest rates, fees, in order for them to do business with you because you were not able to meet the obligation of the student loan. So if you know you don't have the capacity to repay the loan, I would strongly urge you to reconsider borrowing that loan in the first place. Also, you want to know what your credit looks like before you borrow. So take a look at your credit report. Find out what your score is. In terms of Parent Plus loans, your credit score is not going to be a factor there, but your credit history will be evaluated. And the Department of Education will look for certain items that they usually refer to as adverse credit history. These are usually larger items such as a foreclosure, bankruptcy, a deed in lieu of foreclosure. I know at one point, having thousands of unpaid medical bills was also considered an adverse credit history event. So if you have those types of events in your recent credit history, then it's possible that you might be rejected. You could have an endorser. So there are ways around that, but credit worthiness is included in both processes, that of borrowing a Parent Plus loan and that of borrowing a private loan. Uh, Overall, I wish that parents did not need to take out loans, but for many students, the cost of higher education makes it so that paying out of pocket is not a possibility for most households, and some level of debt is involved. Most private lenders, if not all, will tell you that it's best to exhaust your federal student loan eligibility before taking out a private loan. And the choice ultimately, though, is yours. I just want to be clear that Parent Plus loans are not private loans. Parent Plus loans are issued by the federal government, so there's access to federal benefits, and the terms are different. Private loans are issued by banks or alternative lenders. They can come up with their own terms. Credit worthiness will be more of a factor, and there is no access to federal student loan benefits. All right, so let's talk about Parent Plus loans and repayment options. I wanted to show you all the different ways that a Parent Plus loan can be repaid. For all federal student loans, there are these two main tracks that a borrower can take: income driven or balance driven repayment. With income driven repayment, the amount that you pay each month is linked to household characteristics, including your adjustable gross income, your family size, your tax filing status. And a formula is used to determine how much you can afford to pay. That formula is usually somewhere between 10 and 20% of your disposable income, depending on which income driven repayment plan you enroll in. With a balance driven plan, none of the household factors matter. It's just about the amount that you borrowed, and you can decide how long you like to take to pay that back, either 10 or usually 25 years. So in this example, we have a parent that borrowed $50,000 in Parent Plus loans. That's from the federal government. They earn $40,000 per year, filing as head of household with one dependent. With a balance driven plan, the only thing that matters is the $50,000 because that's how much was borrowed. With the income driven repayment plan, that's where these additional facts, such as the $40,000 worth of earnings, the tax filing status of head of household, and one dependent, because that lets us know the family size. All of those factors are used in the formula to determine what a monthly payment would be using an income driven repayment plan. So if you look at this chart here, you're going to see 5 repayment plans. The first 4 plans are balance driven plans. They're solely based on the balance. And all of these plans in the balance driven category are linked to a 25-year repayment term. So if we look at the extended fixed plan, this would give the parent 25 years to repay that debt at the exact same monthly payment every month. That would be $303 per month. And if the parent takes the full 25 years to repay that debt, then the parent would end up paying back almost $91,000. So remember that original debt of $50,000, overall amount to be repaid about $91,000 if the parent takes the fixed plan of $303 per month for 25 years. The consolidated standard plan looks the same. The only difference here would be is if the person had multiple Parent Plus loans and decided to put them together and go on this fixed 25-year plan, $303 per month, overall to be repaid about $91,000. The parent could also choose to take a graduated plan. The graduated plan is one that starts you low and ends you high. So the initial payment for that graduated plan would be $223 per month, but by the final year, that payment will have risen to $482 per month. Same would be said if this person had multiple Parent Plus loans and consolidated them before entering repayment. But what you'll notice is the overall amount to be repaid has gone up because the parent is still taking a 25-year repayment term, but starting low and ending high. That means that in those earlier years, there's more principal left for interest to accrue. So the debt becomes more expensive overall. In this case, the parent ends up paying back almost $100,000 on that original balance of $50,000. Now, the last plan that you're looking at is an income-driven plan. It's called the Income Contingent Repayment Plan. Income contingent repayment is the only income-driven repayment plan that's available to Parent Plus loan borrowers. So if you're looking to get on track for income-driven repayment cancellation or for public service loan forgiveness, and you wanted to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, this is the only one that's available if the borrower has Parent Plus loans or if the borrower has both Parent Plus loans and loans that they took out for their own education, and those loans have been consolidated. So the income-driven options for Parent Plus loan borrowers are few. It's limited to the income contingent repayment plan. With this plan, the parent could expect in the first year of repayment to pay $362, and that's based on their income, tax filing status, and family size. Now, with income contingent repayment, because it's contingent on the borrower's income, each year that information about the income will have to be recertified. And if anything has changed, it's possible that the monthly payment will change. That's why you see a range there of 362 to 319. So based on the Department of Education's formula, they would expect that this parent would pay $362 per month in the first year, and by the last year of repayment, they would be paying $319. That last year of repayment is something that we simply cannot predict because we don't know what's going to happen from one year to the next. So that's just an estimate. I would focus on the first year payment in determining if that is affordable. At this rate, it would be $362 per month. And the projected amount for this parent to repay overall would be about $80,000. But again, that totally depends on this parent's household finances and characteristics and whether the finances, the finances and the characteristics stay the same or alter over time. Now, for parents who work in public service, if you work for a qualifying employer, then public service loan forgiveness could be an option. Under the original rules of public service loan forgiveness, a parent would need to consolidate all their Parent Plus loans and then enroll in the income contingent repayment plan to get on track for public service loan forgiveness. Their repayment history prior to consolidation would not matter, but going forward, they could earn credit toward PSLF by making sure that they consolidated into the direct loan program and then enrolling that direct consolidation loan in income contingent repayment. But right now, we're in a special period where Parent Plus loan borrowers can actually earn credit prior to consolidation. So consolidated Parent Plus loans and unconsolidated Parent Plus loans could gain credit toward cancellation by way of IDR and PSLF. So let's talk about the IDR part. The IDR adjustment is that special program that we are in right now. And to get the greatest benefit, some borrowers will need to take action by the end of this year. So I want to walk through how Parent Plus loans factor into this IDR adjustment. The IDR adjustment is basically an alteration to payment counts, and it applies to borrowers who have direct loans and federally held FFELP loans. So if your Parent Plus loans are federally held or direct, then they would be included in this IDR adjustment. So when the IDR adjustment was first announced, Parent Plus loans were not included as generously as other loans were. So they were treated differently. But in the winter of this year, the Department of Education updated that IDR adjustment to include both consolidated and unconsolidated Parent Plus loans. What the adjustment will do is basically attempt to rectify past mistakes in giving people credit toward IDR cancellation and tracking their payments. And it will make sure that going forward, there's a clear method for counting how far a person is along in that journey toward IDR cancellation. So, what they're going to count toward IDR forgiveness includes first, any month in which you had time in a repayment status, regardless of the payments made, the loan type, or the repayment plan. So, it doesn't mean that you had to have made payments every month. It doesn't mean those payments had to be on time or in full. It doesn't matter if you made the payments at all. If the loan was in a repayment status, then that month can count toward IDR forgiveness. Additionally, if the loan had 12 or more months of consecutive forbearance or 36 or more months of cumulative forbearance, all of those months can count toward IDR cancellation as well as PSLF forgiveness, provided that the borrower has verified their employment by completing that PSLF application. Also, any month in deferment, that's with the exception of the in-school deferment, any month spent in deferment prior to 2013. And finally, any time in repayment prior to consolidation on consolidated loans. This will be very helpful to Parent Plus loan borrowers who consolidated, let's say after many years of repayment, they consolidated to get on track for IDR cancellation and PSLF. And after consolidating under the old rules, they were forced to start over, basically at payment number one on that tracker toward IDR cancellation or PSLF. But now, under this rule, they can earn time toward forgiveness for any time that was spent in repayment prior to the consolidation of, um, of that consolidated loan. So, as for the time frame, in 2024, those of us who have direct loans and federally held loans should see an IDR payment count. This will let us know how many payments we've been credited with, as well as the threshold for us. So, IDR plans offer cancellation after 20 or 25 years. And in 2024, people with direct loans and federally held FFELP loans should expect to see a payment count to let them know exactly where they stand. Right, just as a refresher, any months of time in repayment, regardless of payments made, loan type or repayment plan, lengthy forbearances, months in deferment prior to 2013, except for the in-school deferment, and lastly, any time in repayment prior to consolidation on those consolidated loans. All right, so let's move on to the next question, which is also about income-driven repayment, but not specifically about Parent Plus loans. The question is, I've been paying on an IDR plan for years. My balance keeps rising. Is that normal? So let's dissect this here with an example. I have Joe here. Joe owes $132,500 after graduating from medical school. He's single, has an adjusted gross income of $62,000. With an average interest rate of 5.76%, the loans will accrue interest of approximately $662 per month. Now, quick note about Joe. We're assuming that Joe is a part of the class of 2023, then Joe's loans have not been accruing interest since March of 2020. But after the payment pause ends, interest will begin to accrue. And at this particular interest rate, we would expect interest to accrue at approximately $662 per month. So Joe has several repayment plan options. I'm just giving you three of those options here. I always like to share the standard 10-year plan because if the borrower does not select a repayment plan for themselves, the standard 10-year plan is the plan that they will be enrolled in. So in this example with Joe, with $132,500 worth of student loans, the standard 10-year plan would cost him $1,455 per month. With an adjusted gross income of $62,000, that might not be affordable for Joe. So he might opt for an income-driven repayment option. That's why the next line there says repay, which is revised pay as you earn. That's one of the income-driven repayment plans that caps the payment at 10% of a person's disposable income. So in Joe's case, with that adjusted gross income of $62,000, he could expect to pay $552 per month on the income-driven repayment plan. He would also be required to recertify that information about his income, the number of people in his household, and his tax filing status in order for them to give him an updated payment each year. But in that first year, our estimate here for the revised pay as you earn, which is an income driven plan, is $552 per month. Now, a longer option is another fixed plan. It's called the extended fixed plan, and it's a 25-year plan that requires the exact same payment each month. In this case, Joe's payment would be $834 per month. So if you look at the monthly payment for year one, you can see Joe has a wide range of options. On the low end, he's looking at $552 per month. On the high end, he's looking at $1,455. But the core of this question is a person who's paying on an income-driven repayment plan, but their balance is rising. And I wanted to illustrate how this happens. With the fixed plans, you'll notice that the dollar value of the payments is greater than the amount of interest that's accruing each month. If Joe pays under the standard plan, that means that he will cover the $662 worth of interest, and he'll also be paying an additional $793. So after the interest is covered, the rest of that payment will go toward the principal. And as more payments go toward the principal, the balance of the loan will go down. Even on the extended plan, Joe's required payment would be $834 per month. If the interest accruing is $662 per month, that means that Joe has an additional $172 that could go toward any outstanding interest, but then would be applied to principal. But if you take a look at that one income-driven option there, revised pay as you earn, the monthly payment is $552. So even though that's all that's required, it's not enough to satisfy the amount of interest that's accruing each month. He's got $662 per month being added on to that debt, but he's only paying $552 a month toward getting it down. So as a result, each month there's an additional $110 of interest that has not been paid. So month after month after month, Joe is going to see his accrued interest rising, which will cause the overall balance of the loan to increase because none of his payments ever have a chance to make it to the principal because they can't keep up with the interest. So Joe's monthly payment, at least in that first year with repay, which is an income-driven repayment plan, isn't enough to cover the interest. And as long as his monthly payment remains less than that $662 worth of interest that's accruing each month, he will continue to see his balance rise. This is a concept called negative amortization. With negative amortization, it means that even if you're making payments on time, in full, as required, as long as those payments are not enough to cover the outstanding interest, your balance will continue to grow, even as you make payments, just as you're required to. Unfortunately, negative amortization is common among borrowers who are enrolled in income-driven repayment plans. Now, I don't have the official stats on that. I'm just basing that statement on my experience with borrowers who enrolled in income-driven repayment plans, especially those who attended graduate or professional school. Their debt levels are usually higher, and sometimes the income, at least in those earlier years, is not enough to cover all that accrued interest. And the more accrued interest is left out there, the more the balance will grow, even as they continue to make payments each month as promised. So no, it is not unusual for you to see your balance rise while making payments on an income-driven repayment plan. If you wanted to see the balance go down, then you'd have to add extra to your payment each month to make sure that you're covering all of the accrued interest. And after all interest has been satisfied, then the excess dollars can be applied toward the principal and the balance will begin to decline. All right, let's take a look at the next question. This goes back to Parent Plus loans. This question came in via email. It says, I've been paying on a Parent Plus loan since 1995. I'm an 82-year-old retired teacher. I've been scammed several times. My loan is now up to $275,000 as a result of accrued interest. I retired in 2008 after 40 plus years. So the core of this question is there a way out of this debt? So I want to say yes, but it depends. It could be different paths. But Parent Plus loans in general are eligible for cancellation via IDR and PSLF. If they are commercially held Parent Plus plus loans, then there is an extra step that's required, and that is to consolidate them to make sure that future periods of repayment can count toward IDR and public service loan forgiveness where applicable. During the IDR adjustment, that pre-consolidation history would count as well. So I just wanted to take a moment to show the before and after of the IDR adjustment because I think that that will help people to understand what this borrower's issue is. So under the original rules, credit toward income-driven repayment and PSLF could only be earned after consolidation and after the parent enrolled those loans in an income-driven repayment plan. So if someone had been in repayment on a Parent Plus loan for 20 years, still had a long way to go, and just learned about IDR cancellation and public service loan forgiveness, they would consolidate the loans into the direct loan consolidation and then enroll in income contingent repayment. And their first payment would be payment number one toward either IDR cancellation or PSLF. And for Parent Plus loans, IDR cancellation is set at 25 years. So they'd have a long way to go after already completing a long journey in repayment thus far. During the IDR adjustment, that pre-consolidation repayment history can count. So with commercially held Parent Plus loans, to get them on track, they would still need to be consolidated. However, the big difference is that repayment history prior to consolidation can count toward IDR cancellation. Now, with consolidation, the way that it worked on the original rules was it would reset the repayment count on a loan to zero. So a person could have been in repayment for 20 or 25 years, but once they consolidate, the clock starts with payment number one. None of that history prior to consolidation would matter. But through the IDR adjustment, that reset of the payment count is temporary. So if a person consolidates, then they'll see the consolidation loan start off a new repayment term. But after their payment count is updated, that payment count should reflect the history of the loans that went into the consolidation loan. So you might see, especially people that are applying for PSLF, after you consolidate and apply, you will see that that payment count resets to zero. But that's temporary. It's temporary because they're only evaluating the history of the consolidation loan. And since it's new, it doesn't have much history. After that initial review of the consolidation loan, then they will go back and look at the pre-consolidation history, and you should see your payment count increase. So in this particular example, I didn't have a lot of the facts, but I just wanted to walk through what things look like before the adjustment and with the IDR adjustment. So from what I know, this is a Parent Plus loan that the parent has been paying on or either has had since 1995. I don't know the principal balance or where it started off, but the balance now is approximately $275,000. Now, the borrower also mentioned that they are a retired, I think, public school teacher. So if they were still teaching, public service loan forgiveness could be an option. But since they retired in 2008, I'm assuming that they're no longer employed in public service. Public service loan forgiveness went into effect in October 2007. So without any more employment history, public service loan forgiveness would not be an option. Furthermore, public service loan forgiveness requires that you still be working for a qualifying employer at the time that you apply for and receive the forgiveness. So PSLF right now would not be an option. Now, before the adjustment, I didn't have a lot of facts here. So the monthly payment's unknown. The length of the repayment term is unknown. The expected payoff is also unknown. With a balance of $275,000, I would expect that the monthly payment would be relatively high and that the repayment term would be a relatively long time away from now. Now, with the adjustment, the treatment of this Parent Plus loan would depend on whether the Parent Plus loan is commercially held or federally held. If it's commercially held, it would not be included within the IDR adjustment. The borrower would need to consolidate the Parent Plus loans into the direct loan program. And once they do that, that new direct consolidation loan would be set with a repayment term of 25 years or 300 months. After the loan is consolidated, then the department can go back and review the repayment history prior to consolidation. And since this loan is from 1995, we're looking at about 28 years of repayment history. If they can find 300 months that are deemed as having had an acceptable repayment status, that means the loans were either in repayment, they might have been in a lengthy forbearance, that's 12 consecutive months or more, or 36 cumulative months overall, deferments prior to 2013, except for the in-school deferment. If they can find 300 months out of the 28 years where that condition has been met, then the remaining debt, the remaining balance of this long outstanding Parent Plus loan should be canceled. Now, if the Parent Plus loan is federally held, then consolidation would not be necessary for the same outcome to be achieved. When the Department of Education conducts this payment count for the IDR adjustment, they would see that this borrower has 28 years of repayment history, and they would comb through that history to find out how many months have an acceptable repayment status. Remember, it's not about how many months that a payment was made, it's about how many months have an acceptable repayment status. And if they come up with 300 months, then the remaining balance would be canceled. So, for this particular parent, your course of action really depends on whether the loans are commercially held or federally held. If they're commercially held, then they would not be included in the IDR adjustment. So there would be a need to consolidate there. If they're federally held, consolidation is not necessary, and the IDR adjustment should yield a payment count that next year will let you know where you stand relative to that 25-year cancellation timeline for Parent Plus loans. So I'm hopeful that there's a way out for this parent. All right. Already went through this in the previous example, but just want to share again, especially for this parent, that it's not about months where an actual payment was made. So if you were late, if you were delinquent, as long as you weren't in default, the months can count, regardless of the payments that were made, loan type, or repayment plan. And also, grace periods don't count. I mentioned default doesn't count. In-school deferments don't count. So there's some periods that will be off limits, but this is much more forgiving than the previous rules of the program. So any months in which you had time in a repayment status, regardless of the payments made, the loan type, or the repayment plan you were enrolled in. Second, 12 or more months of consecutive forbearance or 36 or more months of accumulative forbearance. Also, months spent in deferment outside of the in-school deferment, as long as the deferments were prior to 2013. And lastly, this is the huge benefit for the parent whose question I'm answering now. Any time in repayment prior to consolidation on consolidated loans. So if this parent has commercially held Parent Plus loans, after consolidation, they would be able to receive credit for repayment prior to the consolidation. And that opens up the possibility for this 28 years worth of history. All right, as a refresher, all of the income-driven repayment plans include cancellation provisions after a borrower has been in repayment for either 20 or 25 years. It depends on the payment plan they were enrolled in and the types of loans that they had. So you can see here, income-based repayment could be 20 or 25 years, depending on whether the person is considered a new borrower. With income contingent repayment, the only plan that's available to parents, that repayment term is 25 years. With pay as you earn, it's 20 years. With revised pay as you earn, it depends on whether the loans being repaid under the plan are undergraduate loans or graduate and professional school loans. With undergrad loans, it's 20 years. With graduate professional school loans, it's 25 years. All right, so just a reminder, the revision applies to borrowers with direct loans and federally held FFELD loans. If you have commercially held federal student loans, then consolidation would be necessary to open up the possibility of IDR forgiveness or PSLF if you also work for a qualifying employer. Uh, if you want to be considered for IDR, then consolidation would be necessary for the commercially held loans. But I do want to caution people not to just go and consolidate all of your loans, because consolidation can affect eligibility for the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, which is the one that offers up to $20,000 per eligible borrower. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that later, but just know that if you want your loans to be considered for the IDR adjustment and the loans are commercially held, consolidation would be necessary to make that happen. All right. Few points for special populations, those commercially held or commercially managed loans. This could be FFELP loans, Perkins loans, health education assistance loans, those are known as HEAL program loans, or other non-direct loans. You would need to apply for a direct consolidation loan by December 31st of this year to get the full benefits of the one-time account adjustment. But again, I strongly advise against just moving forward and consolidating all of your loans without getting a clear picture of all of the types of loans you have and the potential benefit that might be lost from the Biden-Harris student loan debt relief plan pending the Supreme Court outcome. If you are in default, you can also benefit from the IDR cancellation, the IDR adjustment, but you would need to get out of default. And you can do that using the Fresh Start initiative through the Department of Education. It's ideal that you get on track for that before the end of the Fresh Start period, and that's set to expire 1 year after the payment pause ends. As for people who work for a qualifying public service loan forgiveness employer, all months of credit that you earn toward the IDR adjustment can count toward public service loan forgiveness as long as you provide that documentation of your qualifying employment. So IDR presents a path to cancellation for various populations, but you really have to figure out the types of loans you have and determine whether or not consolidation is necessary. Which leads me to the next question, which is, I have FFELP and direct loans. Should I consolidate them? Will I lose the $10,000? And that $10,000 is referring to the cancellation that's offered by the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, if that plan is allowed to move forward. So the way I wanted to go about answering this question was to look at each of these major loan cancellation programs. The first one is the Biden-Harris plan. The second one is the IDR adjustment, and the third one is PSLF. So let's talk about the Biden-Harris plan first. This plan offers to cancel up to $20,000 per eligible borrower, but loan types matter. If you have direct loans and or federally held loans, those loans are included within the Biden-Harris plan. If you have commercially held loans, those loans are excluded from this plan, unless you are one of the borrowers who consolidated those loans into the direct loan program before September 29th of last year. So the question is, what happens if you consolidate? This answer could change, so I wanted to make sure I put a timestamp on this. What happens if you consolidate? As of May 11th of this year, so as of today, if you consolidate your commercially held FFELP loans or commercially held loans in general, they would remain ineligible for the Biden-Harris plan. So if you consolidate them, there would be no difference. They'd still be ineligible. If you have direct loans and you consolidate them, they would remain eligible as long as the original disbursement date on the underlying loans was before June 30th of 2022. So if all the loans are direct, nothing would change. If you have commercially held loans and you choose to consolidate those with direct loans, that's where we get into a place where things might change. You could lose eligibility for the Biden-Harris relief plan. So if you're a person that has commercially held loans and direct loans, you might want to hold off on making that decision about whether to consolidate until after the Supreme Court makes their decision. Because if you consolidate those commercially held loans with the direct loans, then your direct consolidation loan will include some of those commercially held loans that were previously ineligible for this plan. So the mixture of those two could cause you to lose eligibility for the Biden-Harris relief plan. So it doesn't mean that consolidation isn't the best thing to do in the long term. It just means that you might lose if you consolidate right away. So I would suggest just postponing when you have commercially held and direct loans, just waiting until after the Supreme Court makes their decision so that you don't potentially miss out on any benefits that you could get on your direct loans because you consolidated the commercially held loans with those direct loans. Okay. So it doesn't mean, don't consolidate at all, but it might mean that it's best to wait until after the Supreme Court issues its ruling to find out if the Biden Harris plan is going to move forward. Because if it moves forward and you are eligible for relief, I would like for you to receive it. All right, let's talk about the IDR adjustment. The IDR adjustment cancels the remaining balance after a borrower has been in repayment for 20 or 25 years. Direct and federally held loans are included in the IDR adjustment. Commercially held FFELP loans or commercially held loans in general are excluded. However, the borrower can apply to consolidate by December 31st of this year to get the greatest benefit. So what happens if you consolidate? And this slide is referring specifically to if your goal is to get cancellation through the IDR adjustment. If you have commercially held loans and consolidate them into the direct loan program, they can become eligible for IDR cancellation. You would still need to meet that threshold of 20 or 25 years in repayment, but shifting them out of being commercially held and into the direct loan program means that you get on track for credit toward IDR cancellation. If you have direct loans only and you consolidate them, they will remain eligible for IDR cancellation. Something that could change is the payment count. If you have direct loans from different educational experiences and you had a gap in between them, then your overall payment count could change, but all the loans would still remain eligible. And as long as you apply for consolidation during this IDR adjustment, which is the greatest benefit is set to end December 31st, after December 31st of this year. If you consolidate before the end of the year, then the loan within your portfolio that has the highest payment count, that count will be used and applied to the rest of your loans. So all the loans still remain eligible, but the payment count might look different depending on how long those underlying loans have been in repayment. As for commercially held loans and direct loans, if you consolidate commercially held loans with direct loans, the loans will be eligible for IDR cancellation. So there is no loss of eligibility by combining the commercially held loans with the direct loans when it comes to IDR cancellation. The loss of eligibility as of today is potentially for the Biden-Harris plan, specifically when you're combining commercially held loans with direct loans in a consolidation. So for IDR cancellation, bringing those commercially held loans into the fold can be a good thing because they can get on track for IDR cancellation. But just as a reminder, that Biden-Harris plan that we're waiting on the Supreme Court to issue its ruling for, that particular plan could have ramifications. If you consolidate commercially held loans with direct loans, you could lose eligibility for that plan. So if you're thinking about consolidating those commercially held loans and the direct loans, you might want to wait until after the Supreme Court makes its decision. And after they make their decision, we know if the Biden-Harris plan is moving forward. That will help you make sure that you're maximizing your benefits across all programs. If you do decide to consolidate, you want to make sure you do so by December 31st of 2023 in order to receive the greatest benefit. All right, let's move to the last program, Public Service Loan Forgiveness. PSLF cancels the remaining balance after a borrower has made a minimum of 120 qualifying payments while maintaining qualifying employment all throughout. This is more cut and dry. All commercially held loans are excluded from PSLF. So if you are pursuing public service loan forgiveness, you would have to consolidate your commercially held loans in order to get them on track for PSLF. So what happens if you consolidate? Well, if all you have are commercially held loans that could be FFELP or other varieties of commercially held loans, If that's all you have and you consolidate them into the direct loan program, they become eligible for public service loan forgiveness. You would still have to apply for public service loan forgiveness by documenting your employment in order to make sure that you get the benefit of PSLF, which is having the remaining balance canceled. If all you have are direct loans, then consolidation would not change anything about your eligibility for PSLF because direct loans are already eligible for PSLF. But just like with the IDR adjustment, if you have direct loans that were taken out and they have different lengths of repayment history, when you consolidate them, they should be credited for the repayment history that's associated with the loan in the portfolio that has the most repayment history. So the loan with the highest count in your portfolio, that count would be applied to the entire direct consolidation loan. But consolidating your direct loans would not result in any changes in your eligibility for PSLF. If you had commercially held loans and direct loans, consolidating all of them together brings the commercially held loans into a space of being eligible for PSLF. The direct loans were eligible already. If those groups of loans had different lengths of repayment history, again, if you consolidate those, the loan in the portfolio that has the highest payment count, that's the count that would be applied to the entire consolidation loan. And if you'd like to benefit from PSLF most greatly, you would want to consolidate by December 31st of 2023. Just with a reminder, if you have commercially held loans, you might want to hold off on consolidating them with the direct loans that you have until the Supreme Court makes its decision so that you can make sure that you're maximizing your benefits. That's specifically for people who have commercially held loans and direct loans that they're thinking about consolidating together. If public service loan forgiveness is the goal, then you would have to consolidate them to get the commercially held loans on track for PSLF. But you can always wait to do that until after the Supreme Court makes its decision. And that way you might be able to benefit from both the Biden-Harris plan's relief as well as public service loan forgiveness. Okay, just a quick illustration of how consolidation works during this IDR adjustment period. Before the waiver and the IDR adjustment went into effect, people still had reasons to consolidate. Some people wanted to consolidate to move all their loans to the same servicer. That way, they would reduce the number of payments they'd have to make each month. Also, they could get their loans on track, but only for their future payments to count toward IDR and PSLF. So remember, before the waiver, before this IDR adjustment, the consolidation loan would begin with a new repayment term. The repayment clock would reset to zero, and the borrower would have to, if they were pursuing PSLF, they'd have at least 10 more years to make payments and also keep that qualifying employment because prior payments did not count toward income-driven repayment, cancellation, or PSLF. So in this situation, we have a borrower who has an old FFELP loan with 182 months of history, as well as a PLUS loan with 75 months of history. If those loans are consolidated, the official payment count on those loans would be 0 months. This is under the conditions before the limited PSLF waiver and before the IDR adjustment. So the decision about whether to consolidate was a lot tougher because people had to decide if they wanted those repayment clocks to reset to zero. Now, during the waiver and the IDR adjustment, the waiver has expired, but many of the rules have continued through the IDR adjustment. So if this person consolidated these two loans, the repayment clock would temporarily reset to zero because the consolidation is a new loan. It starts with its own repayment term. But then after the consolidation loan has originated, another payment count would take place to examine the pre-consolidation repayment history. And since this person has two loans, one with 75 months, one with 182 months of history, the consolidation loan would be given credit for 182 months of past payments. Now, credits that are earned toward IDR cancellation can be applied toward PSLF. So in this case, the person would receive their IDR payment count of 182. Public service loan forgiveness only requires 120 months. So what that person would need to do is make sure that they have completed the PSLF application to verify all of their employment after October 1st of 2007 to make sure that they get credit for every one of those months. And if this person was a career public servant, once that PSLF application has been reviewed and their employment has been verified, they would have their debt forgiven by way of PSLF because they took that previously ineligible FFELP loan, combined it with the PLUS loan, and both of those loans came into the direct consolidation program. And as a result of becoming direct and the person verifying their employment, the remaining balance of the debt can be forgiven. In order to get the greatest benefit from this IDR adjustment, the person would need to consolidate before the end of the year. Okay, so that's just to show you how consolidation works before the waiver and the IDR adjustment and after the IDR adjustment. Given where we are waiting for that Supreme Court decision, it's still, for some people, it's still going to be most wise, I think, to wait until the decision is made if they have commercially held FFELP loans and direct loans. So if you have commercially held loans and direct loans, I would encourage you to think about holding off on the consolidation until after the Supreme Court makes their decision, because you don't want to forfeit any potential benefits from that Biden-Harris student debt relief plan if it is allowed to move forward. All right, so wow, we've only got 6 minutes left. So this is the perfect time to wrap things up. And as always, share options for accountability, because as many questions as we receive, we often get some complaints about student loan servicing and the borrowing experience. So I'd just like to share the options for accountability and filing complaints. First is with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You can visit them online at consumerfinance.gov to submit a complaint. Second is the U.S. Department of Education's Ombudsman. The Ombudsman has very specific concerns that they can address. So you want to make sure that you go to the Department of Education's website, look for the Ombudsman's page, and read through to see if your question or concern is one that can be routed to the Ombudsman. And this would only be after you have exhausted your options dealing with your servicer and have not been able to achieve resolution. There's also the opportunity to submit a PSLF reconsideration request. If you feel that your account is low or inaccurate, or if there are months that are missing from that history, perhaps you want to do this. If you recently consolidated and just received a low count, I want to encourage you to just hold on a little while longer before you submit a reconsideration request, because the way that these payment counts work for people who consolidated is that the consolidation loan is counted first. It's a new loan. It has very limited history. That's what makes the count look so low. But usually within a few weeks, people see an updated count that considers that pre-consolidation history. So you might not need to go through the trouble of submitting a complaint in the PSLF reconsideration request when the process is working as it usually does. Next is at the state level. Maryland has a student loan ombudsman that can help with servicer problems, including failure by the servicer to communicate with the borrower, errors in crediting principal and interest payments, misapplied payments, inaccurate interest rate calculations, billing errors, loan consolidation and modification errors, and or inappropriate collection activity or tactics. You can reach out to the student loan ombudsman through the state's Department of Labor. You want to make sure that you have tried to resolve the issue with your servicer first. And if that has not worked, please do visit the student loan ombudsman online at the Department of Labor. There you can also see the Maryland Student Loan Borrowers Bill of Rights. You can learn about the protections to which Maryland borrowers are entitled, as well as the obligations of student loan servicers. All right, we are approaching the end of the hour. So as always, I would like to say thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Office Hours. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. Please do visit the center online at mccfw.org so you can learn about the rest of our programs as well as our vision and mission. And if you have any questions, please do reach out. Fill out the contact form at mccfw.org/contact so that we can answer your questions. And your question might be featured in the next edition of Office Hours, of course, with your personal information removed. In the meantime, I wish you all a lovely Thursday afternoon and hope that you are well. Take care until next time.